turn the cannons around, and what would happen if they lined up New Zealand in their crosshairs and tipped that amount of capital into New Zealand. The New Zealand housing market is already characterized by, low supply, high prices relative to income, and traditionally landlords have been slow to keep up rents with the cost of their houses. These guys are not going to be slow to increase their rents, right? Like that is, for them, it is a business. They will be increasing this as quick as they can. This, in my opinion, would make New Zealand a prime target for these sorts of investors. They're already buying at half price because they're buying in US dollars. So if these investment companies shifted, 350,000 houses that they own in the States to New Zealand, they would own 17.5% of all the houses in New Zealand. And that is very scary. Welcome to Checks and Balances, brought to you by Partners Life. I'm Michael Vincent. This is James Blair. And today, BlackRock are buying all of the houses in the States, and they're coming for yours too.
Don't come for my home, Michael. So I've seen, on socials, these clips popping up around these big wholesale, large institutional investors stealing all the homes from mum and dads.
Yep.
So you've gone and done a bit of research.
I have gone and done a bit of research. And, when we're talking about these types of topics, it's really important to remember that people love a conspiracy theory, right? And, there might be someone out there who's like, no, Mike, you don't get it. I know the truth. Well, we've gone out and looked at the numbers, and actually, it's not really what you think. But there is this myth out there that all the large institutional investors, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, are out there buying up entire blocks of houses, forcing mum and dad investors out, paying 5 times the average house price. So really pricing people out of the market as well, and then just kind of flipping them the bird and walking off back to their offices.
To the big ivory tower.
Exactly.
Now, while you say it's a myth, there are some pockets in your stats which are quite interesting.
Yeah.
So what is happening, Mike?
So let's start at the start, right? So we're talking about the US market at the moment. I'll turn around and point this back to the New Zealand market and perhaps the impact on that later in the potty. But what is actually happening? So in 2023, 26% of all single family homes in the US were bought by investors, right? And there's this kind of, alleged fact out there that they're paying 20% and 50% above those values and skyrocketing prices. And yep, in some instances, they are paying over and above the median house price. However, that's not really what I want to focus on here. I want to focus on how much they're buying first. So in 2023, 26% of all purchases were investors. That's projected to be 60% of all homes by 2030. However, you might be thinking, damn, Mike, that is a lot. That is not institutional investors. That is just most of that is just mum and dad investors who own between 1 and 9 properties. Institutional investors only purchase 3% of all buying activity in 2023. So a very small proportion, right? Now, again, we like the headlines. BlackRock, they're out to get you. They run the world. They've got trillions of dollars under management. They run everything. Well, it's not actually BlackRock who are doing it. It's a company called Blackstone, where I think people are getting confused, right? And Blackstone is a private equity company. They deal in alternative assets, and yep, pretty similar names. And to be honest, they were actually part of the same company back in the 1980s. But Blackstone isn't even in the top 5 players, to be honest.
Okay, Mike. So if it's not Blackstone, it's not BlackRock. Who is it?
Right. So Progress Homes, they own 90,000 homes. Invitation Homes, 83,000 homes. American Homes for Rent, 60,000 homes. First Key Homes, 50,000. Amherst Group, about 40,000. So Blackstone, or who everyone's confusing as BlackRock, they only own about 25,000 homes. And all institutional investors own somewhere around that 350,000, 400,000 homes in the States.
The question is, why are institutional investors buying residential housing?
Yeah, so there's 2 reasons, right? The first one is they're speculating on the price. They are thinking that the price they're going to pay now is going to be less than what it's going to be in the future, right? The other thing is they can get a rental return on that. And to somewhat of a degree, I think it's around the mechanics of buying and selling houses. When you are buying and selling stocks or shares in a company or any other type of kind of investment like that, it's very difficult to manipulate the price with your purchases. If you are buying, and there are pockets where they are buying, entire city blocks or, 4 or 5 houses in a row. If you own 3 of the 4 houses on the block, and then you buy the 4th one at let's say 50% over what its market value is, the other 3 houses on that block already start to get an uplift, right? And they can revalue their book and their security values just by purchasing at higher and higher prices, which means they have a higher return, the investment looks better, and they can go out and do it again.
Before we move on, we talk all the time about planning and growing our wealth, but protecting that wealth is just as important. That's why having the right insurance in place can help when life goes unexpectedly.
And that's why this episode is brought to you by Partners Life, a New Zealand operated award-winning insurance provider with over 300,000 Kiwis insured and 89% of claims paid.
Partners Life understand that having some insurance is better than having no insurance. They have flexible and personalized solutions for any budget or situation.
Check out their website in our show notes below.
So like Mike said, institutional investors are only accounting for about 3% of the total buying activity in 2023. 47% of investors are, mum and dads, individuals who own 3 to 9 properties. Now, Mike, you touched on there are pockets where things are getting quite interesting and these institutional investors are actually having quite a big impact. Where is that happening?
Yeah, and this is no surprise, right? So this is places that are really popular to live that they might see as being a little bit undervalued to start with. So, for example, Arizona, they were 23% of the buying market. Nevada, 22%. Georgia, 23%. And Florida, 32% of home purchases. I find the Florida one really interesting because Florida is in this flux at the moment where, because of global warming and the increase in natural disasters, insurance for houses in Florida is almost going to become prohibitive in the future. They will not insure their houses. So interesting that they've rolled the dice there. But this has actually caused, the rent in those areas to skyrocket, which is way above that 25% average across the country, right? So it's gone up 44% in Tampa last year, 43% in Florida, 35% in Atlanta. So you can very clearly see the correlation between the high density of their purchases and the rents increasing. So it's not like this is some conspiracy theory that popped out from nowhere. There are pockets where this is happening and it is affecting mum and dad investors and renters.
Yeah, I mean, in Florida, like 1 in 3 houses are getting purchased by institutional investors. Rents are up 43%. God, that's pretty scary. Like I can see where these social clips are coming from because they are making a huge impact in some areas.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about the States here. Now let's turn the cannons around and what would happen if they lined up New Zealand in their crosshairs and tipped that amount of capital into New Zealand? Well, the New Zealand housing market is already characterized by, low supply, high prices relative to income, and traditionally landlords have been slow to keep up rents with the cost of their houses. These guys are not going to be slow to increase their rents, right? Like that is, for them, it is a business. They will be increasing this as quick as they can. So this, in my opinion, would make New Zealand a prime target for these sorts of investors because if you think about it, they're already buying at half price because they're buying in US dollars. You've got a geographical distribution of the population in New Zealand, which means that basically most people are in 3 cities, maybe 2 cities. So they don't have to buy all across the country to have a massive impact. There's 2 million houses, there's about 2 million houses in New Zealand. So if these investment companies shifted 350,000 houses that they own in the States to New Zealand, they would own 17.5% of all the houses in New Zealand. And that is very scary.
Yeah. And you think about what's going to happen over the next 12 to 24 months. Inflation is coming down, which means interest rates will come down. We are not building any houses right now because it's very hard to be a developer. We've got strong migration numbers. And then once interest rates go down, Kiwis love property and we'll get back amongst it. You hypothetically add this on top, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and if you look at the recent performance of property in New Zealand, so over the last 10 years, they would be looking at this market and licking their lips, right? And, how likely is that? To be honest, it's not super likely that they would come here and do that. There's a couple of key reasons there. One, we have some legislation in place that avoids foreign buyers from doing this sort of thing. And 2, if they found a way around that, the government would bring in more legislation to stop them from doing that because it would be absolutely disaster for the New Zealand economy and house prices.
Yeah, I mean, we know a government likes to tinker with the property market, right? And I can't imagine any government, blue or red, just allowing this to happen.
100%.
So hypothetically terrifying. In reality, probably not a huge concern.
Yeah.
But definitely really interesting to watch that institutional investor space, particularly in the States, other parts of the world, see what happens next. Thank you very much to Partners Life for sponsoring the episode. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button, give us a review, give us a like, and we will see you next time.
Cheers.